If you've got 50k and you want to get into property investing, this video is for you. I've built up a small portfolio over the years, from studio flats to 4-bed detached houses. I've made mistakes, had a few wins, and I've learned what actually works. My goal with all of this property investment is pretty simple: to build enough monthly income and equity over time to give myself the option to retire early, or at least have more freedom in my life. So in this video, I'll show you exactly what I'd do if I was starting again with £50,000, what I'd buy, where I'd invest, how I'd stretch that money, and how one smart deal could lead to a portfolio over time. We'll look at the numbers, the cash flow, how to recycle your money, and one common mistake I see people make, which I'll come back to later. But let's keep this video grounded. I'm not going to make any outlandish claims or pretend this is some shortcut to millions of pounds. £50,000 is likely not enough to buy you a decent house outright, but it's more than enough to get started with a solid single let. Most property investment lenders want a 25% deposit minimum, so I'd be looking at properties listed for around 140 to £150,000. Ideally something I can negotiate below market value and then purchase for around £120,000. And then you've got costs like stamp duty, solicitor fees, maybe a broker, and then some left over for a light refurb. But let's park that thought. Where's that £50,000 actually coming from? Well, it might come from savings, inheritance, or even releasing equity from your own residential property, which is something a lot of people don't realise they can do. Well, however I got it, I would first start a limited company in my own name, and then I'd loan that £50,000 to myself as a director's loan. And that way, when rental income comes in from the property that I've purchased, I can repay myself over time. And because I'm repaying that as a loan, my company is not being taxed on that money as profit, because it's technically not. Let me quickly mention here that I'm not a financial advisor. Company and director's loan setup is something that a chartered accountant or financial advisor can help you with properly. I just wanted to mention it because it was something that I would instruct my accountant to do. But if you'd rather not go through the faff of setting up and managing a limited company, and you're a first-time buyer, you could actually get started with way less than £50,000 if you were willing to live in a building site. You maybe only need a 5% deposit right now. There's no stamp duty because you're a first-time buyer, and there'll only be one set of bills. But for this video, I'm assuming I'm not a first-time buyer, and I'm sticking to investing my money through a limited company. So assuming then I've got that cash in my company ready to go, what property would I actually go ahead and buy? Well, I'd be looking for somewhere that's a bit tired, so dated kitchen, stained carpets, old bathroom, but ultimately structurally sound and livable. I'm looking for a cosmetic surface level refurb, which is perfect. It's cheaper, quicker, there's no planning permission required, and it's quite straightforward to increase the value. It's also easier to do yourself outside of a 9-to-5 Monday to Friday job, but the house is actually only half the picture. The other half is where is it located. I don't want to be traveling hours to do the renovation work myself. I want somewhere fairly close by with strong rental demand, decent resale values, and ideally a bit of scope for capital growth. So I use a spreadsheet that I built to find high yielding areas within travelling distance of my house. That's already gone out to my newsletter, but if you want it, it's available on my website. I'll put a link down below. It's completely free. You can use it to help find your own area to invest in. So let's break down the spends of this first property. Well, the deposit is 25%, and assuming I'm buying a property that's worth £120,000, that would be a 30k deposit, which is 60% of my cash. And then I've got the cost that I mentioned for 120,000 properties of 5%, which is £6,000, plus solicitors fees, plus any other closing costs. So you're probably looking at about 8 to 10k. And then that should leave you 10 to 12k of renovation costs, which is definitely enough for a light refurb, especially if I'm doing most of it myself. I could quite comfortably fit within that budget: painting, carpets, kitchen, bathroom. Now, in terms of financing the purchase of this property, because obviously I'm not purchasing it outright, I'd ideally use a refurb to let loan. That's where the lender funds both the purchase and the renovation works, and once the refurb's complete and it's ready to let, you refinance that loan straight into a long-term buy-to-let mortgage, often with the same lender, and hopefully get a bunch of your own cash back out. But the problem with a refurb to let loan is that some lenders want you to have a bit of experience before they'll offer that kind of product. So if I didn't qualify yet, because this is my first time into property investment, I'd instead look at using a vanilla bridging loan to cover the purchase, and then I'd use my own funds for the refurb. Once the house is refurbed and rented, I'd refinance onto a standard buy-to-let loan and pay off the bridge. But however I finance it, the key is buying smart, adding value, and creating enough uplift to pull your cash back out at the end. If the refurb goes smoothly and the property revalues well, I could hopefully pull around £35,000 to £45,000 of my cash back out, which could be 90% of my initial cash. That means I've still got a property earning me rent, and I've recycled a big chunk of my cash for the next one. But speaking of rent, let's talk about monthly income. What sort of return does a deal like this actually bring in? Well, I aim for a minimum of 5% hopefully 7 or 8% rental yield, which is the annual income divided by the property value. So say if my property that I purchased for 120 was valued at £160,000 and the monthly rental income was £800, that would work out to be a 6% yield. So that's 9,400 divided by 160k. And a yield like that would usually give me a few £100s a month in cash flow after the mortgage and running costs. It's not life-changing straight away, I'm not quitting my day job anytime soon, but it covers the costs, it builds a reserve and keeps the investment ticking over. And here's how that one property I've invested in becomes more than just one property and I can build my portfolio. If I can get that property revalued at 30% higher, I can hopefully pull out at least 80% of my initial investment, which becomes the deposit for the next house. And over time, if the market goes up, say 15% over a few years, I can refinance this first property again and recoup even more of my initial investment. Some lenders will also let me borrow against the equity in the first property to help fund the next, as long as the rental income supports that loan. So that's how owning property already can help you purchase property in the future. And it's how you can go from one house to 5 houses in 5 years. And each of those houses is generating cash flow and growing in value. So if you're earning £300 a month of gross profit per property, that would be £1,500 a month of passive income. And then you've got the capital growth on top of it. It's not guaranteed, but it's realistic and achievable. And that's how I approach it. But what I've really explained here is the BRRR strategy. Buy, refurbish, rent and refinance. I've got a full video breaking it down. I'll put a link up here if you want to dig into it. Now, the mistake that I said I'd come back to. A lot of new investors try to do too much too fast. They jump straight into HMOs, house flips, serviced accommodation and end up overwhelmed or worse, stuck with a problem that they don't have the experience to fix. I stick to one property at a time. I buy it, I refurb it, I rent it and then I refinance and then I move on to my next one. Especially while I'm working full time, it keeps things manageable and actually enjoyable. And don't underestimate how important it is to enjoy what you're doing, especially when you're dedicating so much of your free time towards it. You want to keep your end goal in mind, like I do, but also have fun along the way. And by jumping in too deep, you'll probably just burn out. So if I had to start again with £50,000, this is the exact plan that I'd follow. I'd focus on one tired but decent house, add value through the refurb, rent it out, refinance it and recycle my cash. And if I stuck to that, one deal at a time, I could build up 5 or more properties over 5 years, each one bringing in monthly income, each one growing in value. That's the long game and it starts with one smart deal. So if you're planning your first investment, I'll put a video over here to my buy-to-let basics. It walks you through the full process step by step. And if you're doing viewings soon, make sure you grab my free property viewing checklist. It's on my website link in the description. Thanks for watching and good luck with your first deal.